Shari Foos, thank you for being here.
I'm
And
delighted.
I think what really drew me to the narrative method when I went on your website was your mention of how I think through this effort that you've been doing for quite some time, an effort to dispel loneliness, connect people through creativity. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Yes.
What's behind that? What motivated you to start this?
My background is originally as a writer performer, and then I've been a marriage family therapist for many years. And in 2010, I moved to New York for 3 years and discovered the narrative medicine program at Columbia. And I had worked with groups my whole life, and I really love the power of a group that's being real with each other, because what happens inevitably is someone will say something true and other people nod. And when that something happens to be about a personal experience, whether it's loneliness or I feel like I'm always procrastinating or whatever that issue may be, you can instantly see other people nodding and you realize, oh, maybe I'm not crazy. You quickly can become 50% better. And I'm not saying that necessarily it lasts through lifetime, but knowing that you are not alone with whatever things you have come to believe are neurotic about you in particular is very liberating. And then, of course, you can't help but look at the culture. That is the reason that those of us who are completely unconnected, who live in different parts of the country, who are of different ages and backgrounds, can deal with the same feelings of loss or less than. And it's because we live in a culture that's constantly comparing us. And that's what we're left with, insecurity.
Yeah, you refer to this as the cult of culture.
Yes. The
Yeah.
cult of culture is just the constant onslaught that did not start with the internet. I think it started probably with radio when propaganda was really starting to come into its own. But certainly those of us who grew up on television, from the minute you're put in front of your first cartoon, you start to figure out what is acceptable, ways in which you're not good enough, or even, false ideas about what makes you better than others, superficial things that get in the way of our sense of self. So for me, to engage with your creativity, which is something nobody can ever take away from you, which is something that whether or not you consciously worked on in art or something that allows you to express yourself, or whether you've been more formally educated, this pursuit develops a relationship between me and myself that is an accompaniment that lasts throughout lifetime. And you're never quite bored in the same way when you have this ongoing dialogue with yourself. So that's really the goal of the narrative method, to bring empathy and connection into the forefront by tapping into your creativity and sharing that creativity and giving others an opportunity to relate to where your imagination goes.
One thing that's really striking about your method compared to narrative medicine, if I understand it, is the absence of comments or responding to others' writing.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that? Because that's a significant, I think, deviation
Yeah.
from that method.
So I wasn't really trying to duplicate narrative medicine. I was so moved by what I learned, by just the brilliance of all the material um, offered to us within a context of exquisite social justice. But there is no career path per se, which is what Rita Sharon said on day one. And I'm not a physician. So for me, it was really about taking that exquisite attention and just upping the game of what I was already doing. For me, as someone who was brought up in a poor environment, in many ways, It took a lot of time and personal work to find my voice and my strength. And I do believe that everywhere we go from kindergarten, certainly through higher education, you're constantly being compared. Your work is constantly being critiqued. And when it comes to an educator making sure that you understand the material, there's nothing wrong with that. But the cumulative effect of always being judged and compared to others takes such a heavy hit on our sense of self and our sense of self expression, which is different than knowledge or facts. Our self expression should be able to flow purely. If you have an agenda and you want to use your expression to create something in particular, that's different. But to cut it off at the flow is a shame, because when you're all wrong, sometimes you're all right. And that's really what I hope to bring through this work, is an experience for everyone, which is that your imagination is such a genius. And if we put our brain aside and get out of the way of this imagination, you'll constantly be flooded with more and more creativity.
And you said something interesting about how even a compliment to someone's work can be a judgment. I mean, maybe it's a positive
Exactly.
judgment, but then I thought about that for a while, and I thought, well, yeah, that's true. Like, what about if other people don't compliment you
Exactly. And it,
in
so
a
it,
group? Therefore, it could represent to them, to the writer, a certain kind of judgment.
And we're sturdy, we're adults. Sometimes
Yeah.
we don't even notice these slights, although we do notice on some level. But if you're in a breakout group with four people and one person gets compliments and you don't, it's not like you have to run home and cry to your mommy, but it has an impact. And so I just think it's so important. There's a wonderful educator named Carol Dweck, and she uses the concept of not yet, as opposed to failing a child. Not yet. We all learn in a different order, we all learn in unique ways. Why should a child or an adult who's also vulnerable unnecessarily have to be thrown out and given the feeling, don't even bother with math? You're just not good. And so, for that reason, I really, really value what happens when we don't compliment, when we don't critique, when we don't offer feedback. And again, there are places where that's imperative, and it's, of course, incredibly valuable. But for us here, I'm dealing with the baby, brilliant vulnerability of what it means to be human. And that baby is delicate.
Yeah, and I really appreciated what you said when I attended your workshop yesterday, and I think you just said it a couple minutes ago about how what's inside of us is brilliant. The unconscious process that's constantly creating, even in our dreams,
Mhm.
constantly creating, and therefore that's the thing that we should pay attention to, and it's one of the first casualties of our educational system.
Course. I
You're
mean,
told not to be creative, but to appreciate the creators,
exactly.
appreciate the writers. So right off the bat, you are comparing yourself to people that have been in literature or things like that. Yeah, what do let me ask a personal question first before I ask about your group. This obviously started your concepts of education, uh, bringing out the best in people without critique, without even comment. You're um, paying attention to how people are judged. What was your educational experience like growing up that perhaps brought you to this moment? It's not just narrative medicine, perhaps, that taught you that, but I think
No, no, not at all. Well,
elsewhere. Yeah.
I grew up in a violent home where I was told I'd never be nothing, and other things. It was drilled into me from the time I was a little girl. And then that, plus what happened in school, which was for all intents and purposes fine, but because it didn't do anything to assuage or disagree with what I was getting at home, it couldn't really lift me out of that. So it wasn't until I was in high school, when I was able to go to group therapy for free, that I met other people that were introspective and I started to understand what was really happening. And that's when I got interested in the work of Marshall McLuhan. And, just being a child of television and understanding how that impact of constantly being, you have BO, your hair isn't good, a woman should be like this, she should be this height, this weight, and all the things that I aspired to be were things that were boys' opportunities, not for girls. So I think the combination of just being beat down first at home and then it not being helped. I wouldn't blame the culture so much as having been the origin of it for me. But I believe that everyone alive today has had, as another parent, the cult of culture. We've all been told these things. We all have these absurd ideas of, you know, whiteness being better and money being better and men being stronger and smart. Obviously, this stuff is no great revelation at this time, but before it was brought into the zeitgeist, it was extremely damaging. And now in this new administration, we're just going backwards.
It's going back. I was going to say the women have received the brunt of that judgment
Yeah.
for from the ages, and here it is again. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about to see what your opinion was regarding artists. If you're a real artist, you want to hear perhaps what people are thinking.
Hmm.
Is that different than what you're attempting to do with your group?
It is. I mean, whether or not you want to hear what they're thinking, you at least want to hear if they like you, if you're an artist, right?
Yeah, that's
Uh,
what I mean. Yes, they want to hear something, perhaps how
of
you
course.
resonated
You
with.
want to be paid, you want to
Yeah,
be appreciated, and all that stuff. But as any artist will attest, that doesn't mean it's not treacherous territory.
right.
You can go from 1 minute to the next from being on top of the world to feeling destroyed. So every artist has to develop some kind of relationship, an inner retreat to tolerate all that. And frankly, I learned so much about this because I do consider myself an artist, and I was a writer performer really my whole life. And when I first came to Los Angeles when I was 20 years old, I quit college because I was the star of this small school, and I just figured, oh, I'll just transpose that to Hollywood. Um, but when I arrived, I did have a different experience of it. And also for the years that I did it, I did so many things. I wrote television, I wrote radio, I performed live, I recorded, I did many, many different things, but I never had an agent because I was too afraid of that rejection. And so my fears and my own path have taught me so much, not just about myself, but that combined with my experience in treatment, working with thousands of people, I feel really confident about this fragility. And I think when we honor and understand and invite people to go deeper into their own fragility, then you find your strength. You find the sanity and are able to tease out what is crazy about the way we have to prove ourselves as artists in this country, as opposed to Cuba, where if you say you're an artist and you get paid. I don't think you get paid well by US terms, but the fact that you don't have to grovel to be acknowledged for your creativity, and that you can be productive without worrying about other people all loving it or all paying you for it. It's really different.
Yeah, one thing that you've really made me think about in a different way is how perhaps how we were raised, how we have responded to education, our culture, um, if we are narrative practitioners in whatever flavor we care to operate in, that to some degree, the way we practice um, is perhaps a reflection of what we want from
Yes.
from the moment. I mean, I have a different agenda, I think, in practicing the way that I do. So, for example, I do like to, I think, and this is purely narrative medicine, I think, when people respond to something, I feel like I need to let them know they've been heard,
Hmm.
by responding um, with a question, with curiosity, with amazement. And I never really thought that that had to do with me as a person who wants to be understood, whose voice wants to be heard and to be found interesting. So I really try to find ways that when people say things to respond in my interest and curiosity and amazement at what they're saying.
And that's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just
But
another way to do it. Yeah,
exactly. But I wouldn't want to live in a world where I never got a
right,
response. That'd be
right,
horrible. I mean, what we can provide in this place with that feedback is we can provide the opportunity to be seen and heard and appreciated from our own perspective. Once somebody reflects it back, we may discover you have no idea what I'm talking about.
right.
But
Yeah.
regardless of that, your very presence to just offer it and just listen feels so good. I don't think that we should have to do one or the other because neither is complete.
Yeah.
And just being listened to isn't an entire life, but it is a good process for your vulnerable creativity to start to trust itself, to go forward, even if you don't get positivity from others.
One thing that I found amazing about your writing workshop was the amount of time spent writing and the two-part prompt. I thought that was brilliant. For 14 minutes, we're writing for 14 minutes, and I was amazed what came out of me. I was amazed at what came out of other people. Um, and can you talk a bit about how you developed that two-step prompting process?
So when I first started in 2012, everything was, of course, live, and salons were often 3 or 4 hours.
Mm.
I've also done week-long workshops and other formats, but the general salons lasted a long time because they not only included writing, but we would look at videos and respond to, fascinating videos, everything from science to any other interesting subject. We would have relational experiences. We would use blindfolds as a way to listen more deeply so writing was really one part of this entire experience. And we started doing 7-minute writing prompts, and it just became a magic number, 7 minutes. So when I tried to take the entire format online, I realized a couple of things quickly. One was that showing videos, even though it's so rich and fascinating, and I have thousands of videos, short videos that could say so much more than I could ever say because either it's not my field or because of all the reasons why a video tells many stories. Um, but I couldn't do that because I realized people would be in breakouts in too free of a form. And I couldn't protect anybody because I couldn't be in all of the breakouts. And I didn't want people to go on and on about, I think this and I think that. So, frankly, this seemed to be the safest way to provide people a frame in which they wouldn't digress and could just be present with each other. So then the writing just became the main format. I do sometimes do special formats. We do interviews. I've done special things with videos, But I think just because we are gathering people from who knows where, and we have had so few negative things happen, but I have to always be prepared. So that's really why we just do the writing for the most part.
Yeah, and I was curious about what people say. What kind of response have you gotten about this process and how people have accepted it? What have they told you?
It's been so profound. People will often say that it's been really transformative for them. And many people will say, I've been getting these emails for months, but this is the first time I had the courage to come, and I'm glad I did because it wasn't scary. And, I think we set an ambiance, and
Yeah.
humor is a liberation
Hmm.
from the pain of seeing your vulnerability so broadly. And so when we can laugh together, not at people, but at human nature. Do you believe I do that too? I step on the scale 100 times a day. I promise I didn't lose any more weight. But why do we do these things? What makes these compulsions? To be able to share with people. I promise it's not just you. We all have this stuff. It may seem neurotic, but if it's this common, is it neurotic or is it just a human trait in this kind of a culture, in a technological world where our nervous system is just stressed to the max all the time? Of course, we're going to be self-conscious. Of course, we're going to be afraid. We see violence left and right. So anyway, humor is has always been my thing, and I I've done it my whole life, but I'm always threatening to do some stand up on stage in your neighborhood. Look out for it.
What your work somewhat reminds me of is the work of John Lawner from the UK. Are you familiar with
Mm-mm,
his?
mm-mm.
It's a narrative practice, and they focus on just asking questions,
Mhm.
but not intervening, not
Yes.
responding, not interpreting, not paraphrasing what another has said. And so their idea is to just keep the conversation going by
Mhm.
asking curious questions without the responses that I like so much. I really love to hear something and then sum it up. Maybe that's the therapist in me. I'm not sure.
I mean,
And
it's all good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's
no, no.
wonderful.
Yeah, and there's what I'm really enjoying about all these interviews is I'm learning the different ways that people have taken narrative practice.
Yeah.
And as we said, it reflects us. It reflects us personally. The way that we do it reflects our attitude towards pedagogy, towards education. It can be a reaction to how we grew up.
Whether you're born into sin or you're just born into not white male, whatever those things that are hung over us, like the real message is why bother living? You're a nothing. You'll never be, you don't have the birthright. Ugh, I
Yeah.
hate that stuff so much. So, I
Well,
get
that's great that I think it's wonderful that you've
mm,
done something positive with that and really turned it around. So it reflects you and I think all to the good.